Hello students, let's start with the second topic of the clinical pharmacy of the unit 4. In clinical pharmacy, we basically go into what all the things the clinical pharmacies are taking place. So by definition, the clinical pharmacy is defined as the branch of the pharmaceutical science dealing with the utilization of pharmacist knowledge, skills and judgments related to the biomedical and pharmaceutical sciences to prove the safety, the cost and the precision of the drug uses in the patient care. So, the basic status of the clinical pharmacy in India is that in the developing countries, in like US of America, Canada, etc., clinical pharmacy has already taken place, but in India, it is in a infancy stage, we can say. So, the role of the retail pharmacist is viewed by many people as simply transferring the pills from a large bottle to a small bottle one, counting tablets, typing labels, and calculating the price. Much of his time is seen as devoted to the routine merchandising of cosmetic, saving supplies, stationaries, and other commodities, which have little or no relation to healthcare. India stands among top 15 in the world in pharmaceutical market with respect to pharmaceutical productions, exports, imports, etc. There is still a need to develop the concept of clinical pharmacy. So, today there is a drug explosion and the information explosion in relation to the drugs. On one hand, there is a development of newer and more effective drugs, and on the other hand, there is a potential hazards of the side effects are rising. So, the first, there is a little time for the doctor patient to diagnose, as the doctor usually has too little time to spend with each patient. So many of the time doctor to the patient by excessive and wrongful use of drugs causes a side effects. More and more people fall ill and what is called a laterogenesis, that is a drug induced diseases, and also suffered with the misuse of the drugs. So it has been increased in the self medication by the patient, and this have led to the development of clinical pharmacy as a new subject. So, the clinical pharmacy can be defined as the branch of pharmaceutical sciences which dealing with the utilization of pharmacist knowledge, skills, judgments related to biomedical and pharmaceutical sciences to prove the safety, the cost, and the precision of the drug uses in the patient care. So if we see the history of the clinical pharmacy when it came into the India, so the term clinical pharmacy first of all is been used in the 1950. So the concept of clinical pharmacology started in the 1960 as with the two incidences. Like the first incidence was held in the 1960, that is known as the thalidomide tragedy that you can see in the picture, like wherein it was found that the consumption of the popular sedative thalidomide resulted in the birth of the babies with sealed limbs, or you can say a shortened limbs, and they died in a very less time. And the second case was in 1968, that is a phenytoin toxicity which was reported in the Australia, which was because of the change in the formulation, that is switching over from the calcium sulfate to lactose as an inert excipient in the tablets. So to investigate all the adverse effects, so the viability, pharmacokinetic and the toxicity of different formulations, and obviously this job was mainly given to the pharmacology and clinical pharmacology developed as a subject in the medical institution, which is known as the clinical pharmacist. So what are the discipline of the clinical pharmacist? Like we can say the concept of optimizing the therapy and promoting the health wellness, the pharmacologic and non-pharmacological strategies for promoting the patient health, and the philosophy of the pharmaceutical care. So the primary objective of practice and the research is ultimately the patient. So the therapeutic knowledge, clinical experience and expert judgment is important to judge the patient. As a discipline, the clinical pharmacy must be engaged also in the research to contribute to the generation of the new knowledge that advances human health and qualify the life. So now we'll see the scope of the clinical pharmacy in different areas. Like first of all, the preparation of patient medication history is being taken by the clinical pharmacist, which is a most important, which has not been taken care by the pharmacist or as well as the doctors. So any hypersensitivities or allergies to the specific drugs observed in the past and the particular drug or the food habits, like the drug dependence or intoxications with chemicals due to the occupational hazards, all of which are likely to interfere with the therapy. So it's very important to check all the interactions. This will help in saving the physician's time and effort, thus will result in faster and more accurate selection of the drug therapy. Next rule scope is the rational prescription. Next is the rational prescription. Like the clinical pharmacist can suggest the physician and help him in selecting the right drug. Like some of the example we can say, the irrational combination was identified by the pharmacists in the hospitals are haloperidol, diazepam and amitriptyline. These all are the antipsychotic drug first line and they causes a severe side effect, so it cannot be given in a similar time. Next is the Risperidone and Centamil. So this also causes a severe adverse effect. Next scope is the bioequivalence and generic equivalence of pharmaceutical formulations. So the number of factors influence the viability of drugs from the dosage form, like the selection of the proper drug therapy based on the bioequivalence studies on different dosage forms of the same drug moiety. So the equivalence is most important. Next is the patient monitoring. By patient monitoring is important to manage by the clinical pharmacist. Like he will observe the sign and symptoms and indicate the need for or reactions to the drug. Clinical pharmacist who knows the correct route of the administration, sign and symptoms of the overdoses, contraindication, whatever the desired effect, undesired effect, and side effects can help in monitoring the drug therapy for safety and efficacy. A necessity with the increasing application of the potent and the toxic chemicals and the drugs. So the drugs with a narrow therapeutic index require larger monitoring parameters, like the patient having the patient are critically ill or chronic diseases. We have to take care their blood pressure or the diabetes. And next is the adverse drug reactions and the drug interactions. So the clinical pharmacists compile and process data using the computers and make it available to the medical staff, may suggest an alternative therapy if applicable, and also identify the drug effect modification due to interaction with several foods, alcohol, smoking, environmental chemicals, as well as due to the pregnancy. Next is the drug diagnostic test references. Next is the intravenous admixtures. So administering all the intravenous injections or saline, the clinical pharmacists take an important role. Next is the drug information specialist, like the clinical pharmacist being an expert of the drug, so it will operate the drug information services and give a proper information about the drug, and through effective utilization and the retrieval of the clinical drug literature, the pharmacist can actively communicate the drug information, and he can help during the emergencies by providing immediate information, or you can say an antidote in case of poisoning or overdosing of any of the drug. So this is about the patient information. And next is the retail pharmacy stores. You are well versed with this, like many of the UTC drugs are potentially which are not interact with the prescription drugs are being given by the retail pharmacies. So the clinical pharmacist at the retail drug stores can maintain a patient profile, family drug profile and family record, based upon which the pharmacist can counsel the patient each time while filling the prescription, and he can all determine the patient responses to the drug therapy and help in the selection of the proper OTC drugs. Next is the discharge counseling and the patient counseling. You have already did a different topic about the compliance as well as with the counseling. So it's very important to counsel the patient when the patient discharged from the hospital, and also check whether the patient is compliant to the medicines or not. Also, while counseling, give a proper information about the disease, drugs, and what is the dose, scheduled storage condition, proper mode of administration, all the side effects which it can be avoided by taking the food or during the therapy. Next is the clinical research and continuing the education program. The clinical pharmacist can participate in the evaluation program on investigational drugs. He can help in conducting the clinical trial based on the sound principles of biostatistical method of evaluation. He also developed a training program for pharmacists, nurses, and interns. Can also play an important role in the medical audit, like they can play an important role in the legislation, contractual obligations, regulation and registrations, clinical expertise in the drugs, or giving a proper information about the subject and per patient, regulation of local or regional microspomia per patient formularies and different. Next is the what are the goal of the clinical pharmacist. Like first of all, it provide or promote the correct and appropriate use of the medicinal product and the devices. So they have main three activities, like maximizing the clinical effect of the medicine, minimizing the risk of the treatment induced adverse events, and minimizing the expenditures for the pharmaceutical treatment. So these are the basic goal and the requirements of the clinical pharmacist.